Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I am joined by John David, a fellow YouTuber and booktuber, somebody who has been making YouTube booktube videos, reviewing books, great collection of reviews in a variety of genres over a period of just a little bit more than 9 years. So today we are going to talk about reading and books, reviewing, and maybe a little bit about booktube, like the medium that we are both engaged in. John, more than I. So welcome, John. Good to be
Thanks for having me, Davood. I appreciate it.
My
I don't
pleasure.
know if I'm any more of a member than you are. You might be newer, but you post videos more often. You'll certainly catch up on video count.
Yeah, in general, I have difficulty, and this is probably another topic, but I usually have difficulty seeing myself as an official member of a community in general. So
Well, that's your humility coming to the fore.
thank you. Well, maybe. So let's begin with a general question. What is the place of books and reading in your life?
It is up until high school or college, it was pretty much casual and off and on. It was to pass time. And ever since high school, college, and since college, I graduated from undergraduate school in 2005, to give an idea. It's become increasingly vital. And it's not just something that I do for pleasure anymore. It's almost something that I do out of a sense of duty. And it's something I do to engage the world in a lot of different ways. I read nonfiction to learn more about the world around me in sort of very obvious ways that a curious person would want to, I hope. And I read fiction to encounter people that I never would have a chance of encountering either at home or abroad, because these are, after all, not real people, but figments of other people's imaginations. And when they're well-written figments of other people's imaginations, they can shed light on yourself, your life, and hopefully make your reading of fiction worthwhile. So it's become more, I know a lot of people still say that they read for fun, and some reading is fun, but a lot of reading for me is, I feel like being like, I want to be a citizen of the world, right? And that is a motivation that drives me maybe more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of it's a drive to feel connected, to find the world and find a kind of a set of connections with the world through understanding and observation.
It's a drive to understand other people, to learn more about the world, about things in the world, about people's attitudes, which you get from both fiction and nonfiction, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it's mostly just, there's do you ever read Howard's End by E.M. Forrester? There's a little epigraph in the beginning, and it's always stuck with me since I read it 15 or so years ago. It's 2 words, and it says, "Only engage." And that's always been sort of my motto, just as a person who is interested in maybe not everything, but many, many, many things. It would be pretentious to list all of them. It's been sort of a guiding saying, a guiding epigram for my life.
That's beautiful. Always engage. Do you have your own categories of books aside from the established categories of fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction, historical? I'm curious about books like maybe that you would categorize as comfort books, or maybe books that I have books that I read when I get sick, just to, I don't know, it's like an easy experience, comforting experience, or books that you like to reread, books that you keep returning to. books that you identify with, that kind of personal set of categories?
That was on one of your questions, list of questions to think about for the interview, specifically about books that I've reread or returned to. And I have to say, the number of books that I've read more than once is very, very, very small.
Mm.
I could probably count them on one hand. I just feel that I'm a very slow reader, very slow, methodical reader, or aim to be at least. And I feel that there is almost not enough time. Even if I was granted another 50 years of life, there are so many things that I want to experience for the first time that might give me just as much pleasure as something that I really did enjoy. But I want to find out about those new things instead of going back to the old ones. That's just a personal preference. I can easily, just as easily respect wanting to go back to something dog-eared and worn. I mean, metaphorically dog-eared, worn, something familiar, and something whose contours that you know. But I always opt for something new.
Mm. That's good. I in general like returning to books. And part of the reason is I discover new things, and I have this uncanny experience of did I really read this? And I like that emotional aspect of returning to a book after years. So okay.
There are things that I really need to go back to. I mean, especially if you have lived a significant fraction of your life since you've read something, especially something that deeply and profoundly influenced you, or that you loved, or maybe even hated. Did you ever read Middlemarch?
No, I didn't finish it.
You started it but didn't finish it.
Yeah, it wasn't the right time.
Okay. So sometimes life gets in the way. But probably my favorite novel ever. But I read it 15 years ago or so. So I think it was out of college, but it was before I started doing book reviews, which is why a review of it is not on my channel. I only started posting book reviews in 2009 or 10 or so, or writing them. So, I mean, I've lived a good chunk of a life since then. And yeah, I probably should go back and reread it.
But a very real way of returning to a book is just in thought. You know, we think about sometimes the book, like I'm sure you've thought a lot about Middlemarch. And that's a kind of return. That's a kind of revisiting. Less obvious way.
Your mood can change what you take away from what you're experiencing at a certain time of life can change it. Yeah. You know.
All right, let's turn to reviewing. So how would you describe the activity of reviewing a book?
Well, we talked a lot about procrastinating, and procrastinating comes to mind. I review, I think it's pretty obvious from watching my reviews that I am reading them pretty much from a pre-written script. All of the scripts that you can find that I make videos from are on my Goodreads account. They're posted in full. Sometimes I do a bit of an ad lib or something if I want to fill out a particular detail or talk about something else I may not have mentioned, but 95% of the time it is just reading straight from what I've written. So there are two components, I guess, actually sitting down to convince myself to write the review. Sometimes it's more fun than others. I do it for every single book I finish, no matter what I have to say about it. Good, bad, mediocre, in between. I feel like I have nothing to say about this book. I will sit down and say something about it anyway. I will think about it until I have something to say. And sometimes that may not make for the most compelling book review, but we can get into this in another question, but the question of why you keep a book review channel or a BookTube channel is another thing we might want to explore. And then the other aspect of it is which usually happens weeks later, is me sitting down, turning on the webcam, and actually convincing myself to put on a happy face for the world and read it into a webcam and upload it to YouTube. And that goes back again to why I maintain a channel. Responsibility is a really lofty word, but and it's probably a word I wouldn't necessarily attach to what I feel the channel is all about. But it's certainly an opportunity, at least, to share what I know, and to do that. When I keep that at the forefront of my mind, it makes things easier. But I have a backlog of probably 10 books that I need to write reviews for. And I just, especially on beautiful days like this, when it's 72 degrees Fahrenheit, I just throw all the windows open in my house and just read all day. Mm-hmm. So book reviews don't really get written as frequently as they should. But I just posted a review earlier today, or posted a video earlier today showing books. So next week I have to have a review written, or else not post anything. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the way you describe reviewing is, I don't know if you think a lot about this phrase or concept of life practices. They say life practice of meditation, for example, or the life practice of keeping a diary, or the life practice of going to church. This sounds like a decision that you've made in advance to review consistently everything that you read. And it sounds very much like a life practice, a commitment, something that you don't decide on a book by book basis. The decision has already been made.
The decision has been made. Okay, with the exception of a long before I met you. If you will go back through my channel far back enough through it, I took a long hiatus in my channel. There's a 3.5-year break from the spring of 2015 to the fall of 2018, where I posted nothing. And it was because I was very busy with work and other stuff. And I read books during that time period, many fewer than I normally would. Read them and finished them. Never wrote a review, and never posted reviews for them because I was too busy with other things. And that might have been just to tell you how few books it was. I think in that 3.5 years, I read about 15 books. Where normally that would be, most people on BookTube would laugh at that. And it's now I'm usually somewhere around 25 to 35 a year, just to give some sort of depending on how long they are and all of that. But with the exception of those books, every single thing for the last, I think since 2010, every single book on my channel has been reviewed. There are on my channel, I think 360 or 370 videos. 300 of them are long form single book reviews. Commitment and life practices are obviously closely connected, and it is something I've ultimately committed myself to do for as long as I'm physically able to do it. But there is this thing, and this sort of ties in with procrastination, and it sounds really corny, but committing to commitment. Sometimes you just want to do other things, right? And like, well, I don't have anything to say about that book anyway, and this is more fun, and I'm on the couch and it's open in front of me. Why do I want to go write about something that I don't feel terribly compelled to say anything about? I just have to remind myself that, it's not an oath that I made to myself or anything, but it is sort of an online record of if I ever come to a point where I've forgotten what I've read, that I can go back to it. So it is not a strict promise or an oath or anything like that, but habit or practice. something habitual, it is. Yeah. And I don't know how. I mean, I decided to start doing this around the time when I posted the channel. I was up one night, 2 or 3 in the morning, in 2012, and I was watching other people talk about. BookTube was barely in its infancy back then. It's hard to imagine a time when BookTube wasn't as popular as it is now, but 10 years ago, there were maybe 50 booktubers, maybe 100. And I mean, all of them combined. And I was just watching someone and I thought, well, I can probably do this. And I started my channel that night. And I resolved to, and in fact, I had written a review the day before and I said, tonight I'm going to post my first book review, which is a review of Frederick Brown's The Discovery of France, I think. And that was my first review. I posted an introductory video, which is very, very cringy to go back and look at, but it's there. I haven't taken it down. And right after that, the same day, I posted that review, and I sort of made that commitment to myself.
Nice. Now let's take a look, or let's consider the perspective of a person who watches your reviews or reads your reviews. Do you think there's a point in listening to reviews in general from the perspective of a reader without reading the book itself? So is there a point in engaging with the reviews without reading, or is it only that like the point of your reviews is to invite people to go and read the source, read the book itself?
I guess on a really utilitarian point, there is, a thumbs up, thumbs down aspect to it. Is this something I want to go to? Is it going to be worth my time? Yes or no? But then there's also something more interesting about reading a review, or watching a review, which is about no matter what book you read, there is a mind that encounters it, right? The mind of the reviewer. And minds do interesting things, as you know, as a psychologist, right? And you can ask 10 people to review the same book, and you will come away with 10 profoundly different opinions. Or even if you have 10 positive opinions, you'll come away with 10 different takes on why it's a good book. And sometimes having someone explain to you why something is good, or how it's good, or how it achieves what it's trying to achieve, is more important than just knowing that it does achieve it, or that it is worth your time. And the interesting thing about latching on to certain reviewers that you might happen to watch or read on a certain basis is sort of, it's like walking into a house whose hallways and whose furniture you're familiar with. You know the general layout. You don't know exactly what they're going to be talking about for a book that you haven't read, but you kind of have some insights into how their mind wraps itself around an idea. And that's one of the things that you might enjoy as a reader of book reviews or watcher.
Yeah, I agree. That's why it is, for me, enjoyable to watch a review of yours, even if it is of a bad book, because I get to see a little bit more of how you think, how you respond to a book, regardless of what the book is. And, occasionally I take it as a recommendation, but that's for me not necessary.
You'd be surprised at how many comments I get when I leave a mediocre, or very recently I left a downright negative review of a novel by Thomas Wolfe called You Can't Go Home Again. And it's certainly not ranked with, The Great Gatsby or anything like that. He's not a first-rate writer, but he is considered by some people an important American writer. And I had someone make the comment, in the comment section that I'll make sure and pass this one by. And I've heard that so many times. I'll reply to it and I'll like the comment. But I've said this in the past. I don't say it anymore because I'm afraid it sounds too confrontational. But this is not a "you should not read this book" video. This is a "John didn't like this book" video, and here's why.
Right.
I certainly do not want people to say, I would never say in a review, "stay away from this book." I might say that about a nonfiction book if it was about something it advertised to not be about, or just, was flat out wrong in how it sort of marketed itself or something. I don't think I've ever read a book like that, but I wouldn't have any problem saying if I did. When it comes to fiction, it's much more complex because people relate to books in so many different ways and find value in so many different things. And what I considered rambling, someone else might consider thoughtful, well-crafted digressions. So,
yeah, what I mean was in that particular review, I remember you used the analogy of a child who wants to say something very enthusiastically, and because of their enthusiasm, the child ends up wanting to, or says a lot more than necessary, and they can't wait to tell you everything. So that was an analogy that just would stay in my mind, regardless of the book that is referring to, because kind of you made it endearing as well as making it a point of criticism. It is and at its core, it's not purely negative, but it can be something that we criticize in a novel.
It felt negative while I was reading it. The book, not my own review.
Yeah, but it makes the review enjoyable. That's kind of
thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Do you yourself prefer written reviews, or do you also enjoy video reviews?
I have to say that written reviews are sort of hit and miss for me. I don't really, I hate to say this, I really do, it wounds me almost, but I subscribe to the London Review of Books and the New York Review of Books. And 9 out of 10 times, I end up throwing them away in the plastic wrapping they came in, because I just rather read my books. And I'm a slow reader, so periodicals just end up taking away. I mean, these are, you've seen these publications. Sometimes they have 3, 4, 5,000 word reviews on 1 or 2 or 3 books, or maybe a small class of books on a single subject. And that's, a half an hour of my reading time, an hour, I don't know. But especially if it's someone I'm not terribly familiar with. I mean, if you've been reading those publications for decades, you're able to follow the arc of a lot of people's careers. But at the end of the day, I tend to read books or reviews that about books that are coming out, if any. As far as watching, I watch precious little YouTube. And the reason is, again, because I'm slow when it comes to reading, and I try to devote as much time as I possibly can to it. Because I'm very, very slow. I mean, people say, I read 50 pages an hour. I'm so slow. Oh gosh, I'm so much slower than that. I wish I could read 50 pages an hour. That would be a dream.
Me too. Yeah, I feel the same way. 50 pages in 1 hour is high speed for me.
That is incredible. I can't read a novel at half that speed. And I mean, goodness gracious, when it comes to philosophy or something, we're talking, depending on how hard it is, much slower than even half that. But I'll watch. There are a very small. I mean, there's some people who are subscribed to hundreds of BookTube channels. I'm not one of them. there are, I feel sort of snobby saying it, but there are a limited number of people in the community whose tastes even marginally overlap with mine. And when it comes to them, I try to be more of a faithful viewer. But I could say, you know, the number of videos I watch on an average week is probably, you know, like between 10 and 20, maybe. It's a few a day.
Yeah, I'm probably close to you. In that way, I definitely cannot keep up to 100 BookTube channels. That's a commitment. And
Oh,
people,
I heard.
yeah,
I've heard some people say that they're subscribed to 300, 400, 500 channels. I mean, I don't know what you're doing with your day, but you're certainly not making a living.
yeah.
Unless you're listening to them in the background or something. That's I can't do that.
That's why it is not. I mean, we don't have to get into this topic, but the whole notion of this corner of BookTube, which is a little community of interconnected, intimate friends.
Isn't that such a romantic way of thinking about it? It's such BS too. It's such BS.
Yeah, or at least we should be skeptical of it, because, you know, most people have jobs, lives, other commitments. It takes a lot of work to even keep up with that corner and, you know, remain friendly and engaged. So it's kind of an impossible thing.
I have so partially out of laziness and partially out of feeling perhaps not as connected as other people do with BookTube. I've almost completely stopped leaving comments. The idea of YouTube being calling it BS might be a little bit harsh, because again, it's all a subjective experience as to how much you personally invest your time and effort into it. And there are people who invest much more time and effort into making videos, writing them, filming them, editing them. We would not be able to do our group discussions with Daniel, you and me, or they wouldn't look nearly as nice unless, you know, you were able to share those videos with me. But I don't edit. I mean, I couldn't edit if my life depended on it. I just don't, for some, and maybe it's because of the books that I read, the books that I find valuable or am drawn to over time just tend to be, and I don't mean to paint myself as some sort of like tragic outsider who has no friends, but there are just, it's a very, very small portion of the community who reads things that I enjoy. I'm very, very glad to have connected with some of them in my comments. They tend to be, you know, repeat commenters, even if they don't have channels themselves. But it is a task reaching out and having those people find you.
I'm all for leaving comments that is out of a genuine interest and it is expressing a genuine appreciation. But I feel uncomfortable when I feel like a comment is somebody's leaving a comment because they want to support me like emotionally, and then expecting from me to support them back. And like that is like that side of BookTube culture, I think, is not sustainable, and it's not a reasonable way of relating to each other. Like, leave comments, and I would do the same if I genuinely enjoy the videos.
There is something to be said about the aspect of BookTube culture that is very trophy comment driven. And I think that's because I've thought about that a lot. And one of the reasons might be because YouTube used to be, I remember much more often when comments on videos of people that we both watch were much more trollish and much more mean. They would comment on people's physical appearances, on how they might speak, on what they did or didn't say about the book, or just generally not constructive criticism either, just rude. And I think since then, a culture of support has grown up around that, saying that, just to mitigate against that meanness, which is good, but it also, over time, it feels like sort of mindless shoulder tapping, like, good job. It's kind of like, here's a trophy for, a video I thought was mediocre, but, I'm going to leave you something anyways, like a side prize or something. It's, I guess I can appreciate where the sentiment is coming from, but it starts to feel trite and old and worn.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad that you saw the goodness in it and gave a charitable reading of it, interpretation of it. My criticism of it is because whenever it is like devoid of its life or life force that was originally there, but now it is just a performance. You mentioned philosophy. What is your relationship with philosophy? Do you see it as an indispensable genre of writing and genre of books, or do you sometimes think that the task that philosophy tries to do could be done in other genres, like in novel?
I don't see philosophy as a literary genre so much as just a kind of idea of thinking, a certain kinds of topics that we think about that we tend to associate as the big questions, capital B, capital Q.
Mm-hmm.
But philosophy can be in poetry. Philosophy can be in drama. Philosophy can be in a novel. It can also be in history, as we've been learning, right? As far as philosophy by people that would call themselves professional philosophers, that reading, I guess I've probably reviewed less of it in frequent years. In years past, I used to review a lot more of it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of doing it wherever it's done, in whatever genre it's done, is quintessentially human. It's I mean, you can't be an interesting person and say that philosophy has no part in your life. I'm not saying you're reading Kant every night. I'm not saying you're writing a thesis on Schopenhauer. I'm saying you're thinking about questions that have ultimate meaning. How do we know? Does God exist? Those kinds of questions. I won't go on, but I think intelligent people think about those questions, and some might concentrate on them more sharply than others. But they have taken up a lot of my time, and I have a degree in it, along with a degree in physics. Never used the philosophy degree for some reason. It's interesting. The philosophy degree was actually an afterthought. I got my physics degree first, because it's the one that in by the time I finished high school, I was almost finished with anyway. So I just took 3 or 4 extra classes, and then found out that I needed to basically take a lot more classes at the university just to get that degree. So I just loaded up on philosophy and ended up falling in love with it in the process. Mm-hmm. So it had always been something that I thought about even before I took my first philosophy 101 class, but formalizing it and learning how to ask questions about it, and then reading people answer those questions. Really, really smart people try to insightfully answer really, really hard questions. Is just about as fun a thing as life has to offer, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. You said something like you can get philosophy in poetry, in history, and it made me think about nutritions. You can get, for example, a very specific mineral or vitamin. You can get it from a vegetable. You can get it from, a variety of sources. And it's something similar applies to philosophy. It is, we don't have to think about it as literary genre, as you said, but it is a way of approaching topics and questions. and it can show up in different places.
And the way I don't like, or the reason why I don't like to think about it as a genre is because it's kind of, if you think of it as a book written by someone with a PhD in philosophy, published by usually a university press, unless it's a popular book. We're talking about very, very largely a group of dry, unreadable, largely very unimportant books. But if you expand your vision to poetry, drama, novels, I mean, you know, I'll go back to someone who Daniel was in love with, Dostoevsky. Reading any novel by Dostoevsky is, if you think about all the questions he raises, it's a philosophical education.
I agree. Now, difficult books. What is your approach with difficult books? Like a book that upon first encounter seems unreadable or a big challenge, and obviously very big challenge. Like the example that is on my mind these days is The Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel, a book that I have never gotten past. Like I reached the 20% of it and then started over later.
The best way to do the phenomenology is to do it with Dr. Sadler. I don't know if you follow through with if you go back in the backlog, but he reads it paragraph by paragraph. That might be one suggestion to help you get to him.
Sure.
Some of those paragraph videos are half an hour long, but that's Hegel for you. And I took a class on 19th century German philosophy. This was a 19th century Germanist, so it was a 2-semester class. We took I took part 1. Part 2 was like Freud, like a very, very late 19th century. I took Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, Schlegel, Novalis, and had a lot of Hegel. She always said that just to not worry about really the meaning of the individual sentences, but to go along and follow the flow of ideas as they sort of wash over you paragraph by paragraph. Gregory Sadler does the sentence by sentence thing. It's kind of you can do both or one or the other. Hegel is hard. The phenomenology is very hard. Kant is a little bit easier, but German philosophers tend, for whatever reason, to be tough. Going outside of philosophy, there are hard books, and then there are books that, one always comes to mind, that I absolutely have no interest in because they seem ridiculous to me. I'm thinking of Finnegan's Wake. I don't know if have you opened the first page?
No.
Okay. Do yourself a favor. Try to read the first page of Finnegan's Wake and see what you make of it. As soon as we finish this video, I'd be fascinated to hear your response.
Okay.
And I do it maybe once a year, just the first page. and I know why Sylvia Plath had a nervous breakdown while she tried to read it. She had a psychotic break while she tried to read that book. And I think it was because she was seeing things in it that weren't there, maybe. But so that is, I think there are other books out there like that are just really just meant to show off. I almost want you to go read it right now, but to see what I mean. But
I will do it before the end of the day.
Okay. You have to get back to me too.
Sure.
But as far as hard as in just challenging yourself, pushing your limits out of, not reading, just Stephen King or romance novels or something like that, I think that's essential. And even if you read history all day long, read something harder than the kind of history you usually read. If you read popular history, read a monograph of something you like. Read something by someone who specializes in something very specific. I'm always trying to push my limits as far as what I can understand. Not always, but I try to make that an active part of my reading life, pushing my own understanding beyond what I feel comfortable with, because that's how you grow boundaries, and that's how you learn. I mean, it sounds silly to say, but it's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, we already talked about your reviews that they are written, available on Goodreads. I want to ask more generally about your writing. Do you have other writing practices or life practices that take the form of writing? And would you consider publishing a collection of your reviews at some point?
You're really pushing for this, aren't you?
Yeah.
My
dream is to write the introduction or the foreword.
I would be humbled. Life practices that take the form of writing, I have tried numerous times to start something like keeping a journal, or even, as simple as it sounds, trying to take notes on books that I read. Really like tough books. And I've shown this on my channel, but I'll show this to you. This one, I'm 40 pages through it. This is Peter Brown's discussion of the importance of wealth in the early Christian church from 350 to 550. It's an extremely scholarly book. And the arguments in it are, excuse me, jam-packed and dense. I still cannot find the time or the motivation to write down even scribbles of arguments that he's trying to make. So what I'll probably end up doing when it comes time to write a review is flipping through 450 pages of text and trying to, thread together the most important ideas. It would save me so much more time if I actually try to make a habit out of it, just like I make a habit of writing reviews in the first place. But for some reason, I haven't been able to compel myself to do it. And I know how to do it if I wanted to. I know how to build a habit, but I still haven't started.
It could be a genuine aspect of a style of reading and reviewing, especially, that is more just like impressionistic paintings, that you let go of the detail, including the details of the argument. You let go so something else comes to the foreground, namely the general impression or overarching.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I would like to think I could do justice to something like this in that way. But when I actually post my review of it, you can let me know what you think.
Sure. Looking forward to it.
But as far as journaling, even taking notes in books or about books, no. As far as the book of reviews, this is it's something I've actually passingly thought about before. If anyone was interested, I would probably consider it. But there are some reviews that are very short, maybe just a few hundred words, and there are others that are 1,000 words. I don't know if that would be much of an issue, but I'm not dead set against it. I just don't know anyone who is, a publisher who would be interested in it. I am not a name in the publishing industry or book reviewing world at all. Everything I do is for free. I've never been paid for a review. I've had people send me free books, if you want to call that a payment. But my name is not out there and open for access. I don't put my last name on this channel for a reason. Yeah, I don't know anyone who would actually be able to contact me who is able to make something like that happen, to make it happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so it has to be the request has to come from outside?
Well, I mean, the request would need to come, well, for me to consider it
Sure.
as something to possibly have to work on and take seriously, and more than just a pipe dream. Someone who could actually make this happen. I mean, at the end of the day, if I invest work and time and dozens or hundreds of hours into a project, what I want in my hand at the end of the day is a copy of my written book reviews, published by so and so. I don't want pipe dreams all day long. I'm not that kind of person. I want a concrete object in my hand.
Makes sense. All right, John, last question. How are you finding our chapter by chapter discussion of the Tropics of Discourse? How is that different from the other ways of reading that for you? Is that like, do you feel impatient with it? Is it that
I have to admit, now that we get towards the end, I am feeling the same drumbeat over and over again sometimes in the essays, which is not to say that I don't like them, but the more we read on, the less, the fewer original ideas maybe I'm seeing. What I enjoy most out of them and what has not been lessened at all is just the pure joy of getting to talk to you and Daniel every other week. Right. That is what comes. That's what has me coming back to it. If I were reading this on my own, I probably would have stopped maybe around essay 5 or 6, and felt that I had gotten the gist of the book.
Right.
But we're going to finish this, and then we're going to go on. We'll make an announcement about what else we want to read, and I look forward to finishing this, but even more so to starting something new. And as far as how it's different, Daniel's brain is we said earlier that brains do interesting things, and talking to Daniel is certainly evidence of that. I love how he thinks about these, and I love how, needless to say, you think about them too. And when you get 3 people together who have all read the same thing, and they each bounce their ideas off of one another, it's in many ways fractally more enjoyable than just one mind doing it, because you get to see so many other angles and perspectives and facets that you wouldn't have seen just all by yourself.
Yeah, it is difficult to predict how each conversation goes, and time passes by very quickly for me for each of our sessions. And what I really hope is to see is, speaking of pipe dreams, I want more people on BookTube, because there are a lot of people on BookTube now. I hope to see more people doing this. Groups of 3, 4, 5 people discussing a book that they like in a serious way, chapter by chapter. But that would be good. That would be a good thing.
It is. I think it's tough for some people to go chapter by chapter. I mean, it's great for essays, but say like if you take, I forgot how many parts. The Brothers Karamazov has 2 or 3, but to discuss it in 2 or 3 chunks, it's a 900-page novel. So each chunk is going to be a lot more than we talk about, with the 20-page essays of Hayden White. But yeah, to devote more than one video to a piece,
right,
a novel, would be, because to take it chapter by chapter, you'd have 100 chapters. I don't think anyone would go through all that. But to give it more consideration than even just a single long form book review, to give it in-depth discussions by multiple people, I think that's really important. And I've seen a few of them on one of my friends, Peg, over at the History Shelf several months ago. She did a group read of the Brothers Karamazov, interestingly enough, and they had a session with 4 or 5 people. I would love to read a novel with you guys sometime, or to keep going with the essay thing. I think we could read just about it. In fact, I've been thinking about what else we can read after our. I don't want to announce it here, but we may have mentioned it somewhere else. But the next thing we have decided on I'm already thinking past that since it's rather short.
Great. Yeah, I'm also looking forward to things we will read together, including novels. Yeah, that's
and by the way,
something
well,
by Joyce.
can I ask the question without it seeming too weird, because no one is okay. So what it was Philosophical Mondays. Is that the Philosophical Mondays?
Existential Mondays.
Existential Mondays. Thank you. By Benjamin Fontaine. That's what we're planning on reading next, and it is about 80 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
It's even a little bit shorter than it looks, 80, 90 maybe. And I was wondering how we should break that up. Is that a one conversation book? Is that a?
I think it contains 3 or 4 essays.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, 4 essays.
Okay. You want to do each one separately?
We can divide it, or we can do 2 essays per meeting, something like that.
I was just looking at it and sort of casually thinking about how we were going to break it up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would. I was thinking about how someone's, either you or Daniel, said that you really loved essays and thought that was. So I was thinking about all of my books of essays, which I used to have in one centralized section of my library, but now it's 3/4 of it is in the shed, and one small part is here and there, and it's all spread everywhere. But
Daniel was the one who expressed essays, his fondness for essays, and he also proposed Isaiah Berlin as a possible next.
That's right. Yeah. Now we have one more idea: the Russian thinkers, right?
Sure. Based on your most recent video.
That's right.
Great. Thank you, John.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Davood. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.